The news day continues here on One News Now. I'm Diego Castro, bringing you the biggest headlines from around the world. Ukraine hails its first substantial advances in the battlefield in 6 months as President Volodymyr Zelensky wins pledges for new long-range drones in Britain. These would add to a haul of Western arms for a counter-offensive against Russian invaders. This comes after Zelensky met with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in a tour that brought him to Rome, Berlin, and Paris to pocket major pledges of weapons. Sunak's government also vowed to soon start training Ukrainian pilots to fly fighter jets. After a half year of digging in on the defensive, Kyiv is now preparing a counter-offensive using hundreds of new tanks and armored vehicles sent by Western countries since the start of 2023. This as Ukraine aims to recapture 6 of its territories that Moscow claims to have annexed. Turkish voters will head back to the polls in 2 weeks for a runoff election that will decide if conservative President Recep Tayyip Erdogan or his main rival will lead the country that is struggling with sky-high inflation as it plays a key role in NATO's expansion. Election officials that the second round of presidential elections is set on May 28, with preliminary results of the first round showing that Erdogan won 49.5% of the votes, while his rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu grabbed 44.9%. Despite this, Erdogan earlier believed that he is far ahead of his rival, but stopped short of declaring outright victory.
Komisyonların genelinde Cumhur İttifakı hakimdir. Dolayısıyla mecliste çoğunluğu Cumhur İttifakı'na veren milletimizin tercihinin Cumhurbaşkanlığı seçiminde de güven ve istikrardan yana olacağından şüphe duymuyoruz.
Kılıçdaroğlu meanwhile said earlier that he will accept the people's decision for a second round. He also noted that Erdogan had not obtained the result he wanted in Sunday's election. Kılıçdaroğlu, who leads the pro-secular main opposition party, is confident that he will win the runoff against Erdogan. Kılıçdaroğlu campaigned on promises to reverse crackdowns on free speech and other forms of democratic backsliding and to repair an economy battered by high inflation and currency devaluation.
Erdoğan, bütün iftira ve hakaretlerine rağmen beklediği sonucu alamamıştır. Hiç kimse bir oldu bittiye heves vermesin. Seçim balkonda kazanılmaz. Veriler şu anda akmaya devam ediyor. Milletimiz ikinci tur diyorsa başımızın üstüne.
China sentences a 78-year-old U.S. citizen to life in prison over spying charges. John Xing Wang Leung also holds a permanent residency in Hong Kong, was arrested on April 15, 2021. His detention came after China had closed its borders and imposed travel restrictions against COVID-19. Details have not been released other than vague accusations of infiltration and threatening state security. The U.S. Embassy in Beijing said it is aware of the case but could not comment further due to privacy concerns. The government of Hong Kong said it has also been informed by Chinese authorities about the arrest. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now World. I'm Diego Castro. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau headed to Alberta to meet with soldiers fighting wildfires that worsened over the weekend. Trudeau made the visit as the wildfires have forced evacuations at one point of more than 30,000 people. The fires have also hit energy production in Canada's main oil-producing province, as oil and gas producers shut in at least 319,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day. More than 100 wildfires have raged this month in Canada. Officials in Alberta expect hot and dry weather conditions to continue after they cause an upsurge in wildfires.
The fire danger is extreme again today. As expected, we saw an increase in fire activity yesterday due to these hot and dry conditions. Our peak burning period, which is when the temperatures are at their highest and the fuels are at their driest, is still in front of us.
World leaders, including U.S. President Joe Biden, are set to attend the G7 summit in Japan later this week. A senior U.S. official said the summit will show leaders unified behind a common approach to dealing with China. He added that it will demonstrate Washington's continued support for war-torn Ukraine. After the three-day summit starting Friday, Biden will make a stop in Papua New Guinea and then in Australia. Meanwhile, finance leaders of G7 nations are expected to warn of more global economic uncertainty. In a communique seen by Reuters, they called on countries to be vigilant in their macroeconomic policy. Bloomberg opinion columnist Andy Mukherjee says to save the planet, it may no longer be enough to use more electric vehicles or flood the power grid with solar and wind power. He says to save the planet, the world will have to re-industrialize. More details on Bloomberg's opinion.
I've been thinking a lot about this big idea called degrowth, which suggests that humans can't really control global warming without slowing or perhaps even reversing economic growth. What it implies is that massive developing nations like India, or for that matter 4 out of 5 people in the world, will have to accept lower living standards than the West. And degrowth assumes that really there is no way for people everywhere to aspire to a more prosperous life next year and the year after without destroying the planet. I just returned from a very exciting trip to a $3.5 billion power experiment in India, which gives me hope that the degrowthers are wrong. This is Greenco's project in Kurnool, in the southern Indian state of Andhra Pradesh, a barren rocky patch of land about a 3-hour drive from the bustling Indian city of Hyderabad. The weird tunnels that you see, those, come next year, will be carrying water between 2 man-made lakes. One of the lakes will be set lower, the other one will be set higher. When the sun is shining bright or the wind is blowing strong, the electricity produced by solar panels and windmills in the vicinity is going to be used to pull the water up from the lower lake to the upper lake. The potential energy of the water will be released as kinetic energy when renewables are not available. Water will come gushing down and hit turbines, these massive turbines, and rotate them to produce electricity. Simple high school science? You bet, but it has the potential to change the economics of the fuel of our future, green hydrogen. Without 24/7 renewable energy, there may not be a way to make green hydrogen much cheaper than $6 to $7 a kilo. But with it, it is entirely possible to lower the price to $3 or so, Greenco assures me. But how to make green energy available round the clock when the sun doesn't shine for 24 hours a day? You can't really do it with lithium-ion batteries at this scale, which is why China and India are making such a big push into pumped storage hydro, or what Europe calls water batteries. Bottom line, to save the planet, it may no longer be enough to switch all of transportation to electric vehicles or to flood the power grid with solar and wind power. We must store renewable energy cheaply and intelligently to reimagine a new industrial structure minus carbon. we have to re-industrialize to decarbonize. The physics of the water battery fused with the chemistry of ammonia may give us our best chance to rewire production, consumption, and trade in such a way that we don't have to accept lower living standards, and yet we don't end up warming the planet much more than 2 degrees Celsius. It's still not too late to hope. Degrowth doesn't have to be our destiny.
And those are the top world headlines of the hour. Join us again at 9 a.m. as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. Coming right up is Agenda at 8 a.m. I'm Diego Castro. We are One News, all sides, all the time.